Hi, this is Billie Beene here with a U.S. News Update. Today's date, April the 11th, 2024. Time in Texas, about 7 p.m. Episode 158. Some of the things we'll be covering: Antarctica, and U.S. courts and illegal rights, children rescued, the Red Hats, and Burisma and its association with 2020 and the tea attack in Russia. Some of my sources are God in the Bible, Patriot subscribers, Real Raw News, Before It's News, an interview by David NINO RODRIQUEZ with 107. Before It's News, a Michael JACO session about predictions, suspicious observers, Earthmaster, space weather, into thin air. It's an interesting YouTube video about what's happening out of Antarctica. It's very strange. Joshua Phillips with Crossroads, Zero Hedge, at Plus. So let's get started. So I'm going to begin with Patriot subscribers. In Spain, near Tenerife, an island off of Africa. So I'll go ahead. We have Antarctica. We've got Africa. We've got the U.S., the Atlantic Ocean. So we have something coming up from Antarctica that could impact us in the U.S. So Tenerife, we've got La Palma Island, Tenerife, right about here on the edge of Africa. So my Patriot subscriber says in Tenerife, recently we had out of Spain. So Spain, we've got Spain, Portugal, in this area. We saw two military vessels, and between Gran Canaria, or La Palma, Canary Island, and Tenerife. Helicopters were flying for many hours. And I'd like to say thank you to some of my Patriot subscribers for extra support for my channel. Becky D, Roses and Rags, Kim C, Dana B, LaShawn E. Thank you so much. I have a Patriot subscriber who's talking about squatters in Florida. In Florida, we have stand your ground and castle laws, so we can use force, even up to deadly force, to defend our lives and our property. I have a Patriot subscribers talking about Israel was recently caught selling Patriot missiles, the U.S. supplied to China, packed in boxes of fireworks. I would believe it. And we have this, making a connection between the recent earthquake in New Jersey, 4.8, and the day of the eclipse, 4.8. I have a Patriot subscribers talking about in food, we have crushed bugs, crickets that give us parasites. And there are crickets, powdered crickets inside certain products that are part of an oat product and also soft drink. Yeah, I had a video I put out a few months ago talking about products and children's foods. France did a study on it. If you're looking at the label, you would see something like E140 and E120. And these were crushed bugs for color and sweetness. And so France outlawed those. They can't be in products in France. But if you're reading an ingredient label and you see E, that just means Europe. But 140 and 120, these are crushed bugs. And my Patriot subscriber is right. We could eat crushed bugs and then get parasites from that. That's true. I have a Patriot subscriber talking about NATO. The U.S. needs to get out of NATO, I agree. And also NGOs and the UN and the WEF and the WHO and the George Soros organizations. I agree 100%. I have a Patriot subscriber who's talking about the U.S. military in Virginia are currently doing Black Hawk training. Yeah, our U.S. military, based on the Middle East, is on high alert, I understand, and in many areas. And now we have this. So we'll talk about some recent weather. We had across the U.S., we had many storms over the weekend. I understand from Texas Weather Center, get ready for a fresh round of storms in Texas beginning Monday. Today, Florida has thunderstorms, possibility of tornadoes. Now, in our space weather, we have space weather, bringing this up. We have the sun, we have the earth, and today, on the far side of the sun, we had an M-class 4.8. Tomorrow, the sun will turn to face Earth, so we may be experiencing some space weather tomorrow. And from space, yeah. And we have also at Mount Etna in Italy, a volcano is blowing smoke rings. And we have this. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about Antarctica. Now, this first came out on Hal Turner. I'll link this for you into Thin Air. That's a YouTube channel that's showing the propagation of bizarre 80-foot waves that just suddenly came off of Antarctica, and they're believed they'll move up to either side of Africa and eventually to the Atlantic Ocean. So on April 9, these began to appear, and in Antarctica they were measured at 83.7 feet. This is by the Ventusky.com ocean monitoring system. And by April, in the next few days, they're going to be on either side of Africa. So at Africa, they're going to be at 62 to 63 foot waves. And then by April 15 to 17, they're going to be in the Atlantic Ocean, moving toward the U.S. at 42 to 45 feet. Now, I'm very curious about what prompted this. How did it get started in Antarctica? So that's a weather phenomenon. We are experiencing an anomaly currently. Now, we had the hurricane forecast come out of the University of Colorado. They give their annual prediction for how many hurricanes we will have this year in our hurricane season, beginning now all the way up to like in the early fall. And typically, and we understand universally, the ocean temperatures are up in all oceans, so that would also lead to the formation of more hurricanes. They draw energy from the warm ocean. So on average, we have 14 named storms, and a storm is named when it's up to a wind speed of 39 miles per hour. And typically in an average year, we have 14. This year is predicted 23. In an average year, we have 7 hurricanes. That means the wind speed increases to 75 miles per hour. This year, we will have 11 hurricanes, so we see an increase. And on average, we have 3 major storms. A major storm is a Category 3 plus. A Category 3 has a sustained wind speed of 111 miles per hour. Category 4, 130 miles per hour. Category 5, 157 miles per hour. So on average, we have 3 major storms, hurricanes per year. This year is predicted 5. So we see predictions by the University of Colorado for more earthquakes and more hurricanes this year. And yesterday we had a sudden drop in the stock market affecting the Dow, NASDAQ, S&P 500. 10-year treasuries were up at 4.499%. Consumer price index is up. Average citizens can tell you, yes, we're paying more for our groceries and gas and insurance and other things. And now we have this. We're going to begin now talking about some things going on in the U.S. With our courts and politics. So I'll do a new map for you. Florida, Texas, California, Washington State. So we have a judge in Washington State in Cowlitz County. According to Breitbart, Judge Gary Bashar is bringing this, that Washington State tried to pass a law outlawing high-capacity magazines for weapons. Judge Gary Bashar threw it out and says it violates both the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of Washington State. Way to go, Judge Gary Bashar. And we have this. The House, so in our Congress, we have the House and the Senate, and no bills or laws can be passed regarding money except through the House. So the House of Representatives holds no money to Ukraine nor Israel. And House Speaker Mike Johnson, third in line to be president, should something happen to JB and KH, will not allow a vote to be brought to the floor. Curious historian brings this out. A senator from Pennsylvania, actually a Democrat, John Fetterman, says that illegal squatters have no rights. And he advocates deadly force to defend life and property. So we see a Democrat apparently coming to the light, having a Jesus moment. Now we have this new information coming out from Michael JACO. Mexico doesn't allow chemtrails, so there's no chemtrails in Mexico. When we, the people, regain power, we need to outlaw chemtrails in the U.S. also. But this new information he's bringing out is that there have always been tunnels, we know, underneath, coming from Mexico into Arizona, California, tunnels. So he had an intel that the tunnels have been upgraded and now include air, electricity, and rail cars. to increase trafficking, humans, children, underneath these tunnels coming into the U.S. So that's going on. And he was giving predictions. He sees in the New Madrid seismic zone an increase of earthquake activity, likely associated like 40 to 50 days after the eclipse, April 8. And he sees an increase in Cascadia, an increase in earthquakes in this area. So that's going on. And so we see the illegals want to come across the border now in more comfort, have air and rail and electricity in their underground tunnels. Zero Hedge is reporting Senator Rand Paul. So Senator Rand Paul, he's a Republican out of Kentucky, says that 15 U.S. government agencies knew about the C virus and that they also participated in the production. But they didn't since 2018. Now, my research says this is true, but the C virus was put into place in production, I would say, about 20 years ago by the deep state. We did have, I do believe, 15 U.S. government agencies knew about it, including DARPA, and put forth approval and money. And then it was finalized in the lab in Wuhan, China. And that agrees with my research too. And he brings this out, the objective gain of function. Anytime you're doing anything in a lab that involves gain of function, it's to produce a bioweapon. And it was to insert furin, F-U-R-I-N, cleavage into the coronavirus, gain of function bioweapon, and make a new chimera virus, the C-19. Yeah, that goes along with my research too. What's significant now is that we have a U.S. Senator bringing this out publicly, and that Dr. Fauci and his Rocky Mountain lab were a partner with the Wuhan lab, and that correlates with my research also. And they're trying to bring about the next pandemic. Now, it's my belief that the U.S. government, DARPA, parts of the shadow U.S. military weaponized Ebola in the 1960s and 70s. And so we have sources, like from around the world, BPEARTHWATCH, JWTV, putting forth that during the eclipse over the path of totality, that chemtrails were used to release some type of bioweapon. I find that very believable. Going over this way. Now, Mike from around the world's intel was that the people who were exposed, and BPEARTHWATCH brought this out, that there were less people out viewing the eclipse on April 8. So the chemtrails also sprayed over areas like Florida and other states, I guess to increase their saturation of the U.S. population. Now, Mike from around the world said people would be exposed to this bioweapon released through chemtrails, in the path of totality, April 8. So different people would begin to have symptoms 7 days later, 20 days later, 30 days later. Now, these other YouTube sites, BPEARTHWATCH and JWTV, and I'd also like to ask my Patriot subscribers, if you are, in the next few weeks feeling sick or you think you were exposed to something, I would like to know about it so I could put that information out also. So that's going on. And now we have this from BREITBART. So we see states beginning to become more conservative as it becomes obvious the American people are returning to their embrace of conservative values. So in Arizona, we had a recent court decision upholding in Arizona a 123-year-old law that bans all abortions in Arizona, except in the case where the mother's life is threatened. So way to go, Arizona. And now we'll talk about some information from Real Raw News. We'll talk about the Red Hats, a new group coming out. So we have in Kansas, we have recently 11 children. It was both a male and female, age 6 to 12. The U.S. Marines, through cyber contacts, became aware that a group of children were they were shackled inside an abandoned railroad boxcar in between two counties in Kansas, and the Marines were able to rescue them. So they were between Lane and Rush counties in Kansas. The Marines rescued them a few days ago. And we have this. Then the Marines were looking for the perpetrators. And so about 2 p.m. Tuesday, and this rescue of the children happened on Saturday. So from Saturday to Tuesday, then the Marines isolated a warehouse, also in Kansas, in Salina, Kansas. And they had orders to arrest, it's believed these were FEMA. So that would be a shadow FEMA group. And it's believed the shadow FEMA also perpetrated the kidnapping of the children. The children were rescued and they all did appear healthy, and they were taken for medical assessment, but they all appear fine and rescued. Okay, so then the Marines went around this. It was a warehouse. So we had 2 Marines on the outside of the warehouse. 4 Marines were flanking the front door, and marksmen were aiming rifles through the windows. The squad commander keyed his mic twice. That was the go signal. The Marines kicked down the door and they charged inside. But what they found inside were 4 dead, bloody bodies. And it appeared that these 4 individuals had been tortured, eyes removed, multiple stab wounds with a screwdriver, fingers severed with hacksaw. Now 2 were in work clothes. A third was shot in the forehead who was wearing a suit, and a fourth had stapled to his chest an 8x10 picture of one of the children who had been rescued. So the Marines believe this could have been the work of what they call the Red Hats. Now, I'll give my analysis of what I think the Red Hats are. I believe the Red Hats are a paramilitary group put in place by the shadow CIA to mimic and put forth a public story that these are white hats. These are conservative Americans who are taking the law into their own hands. That's what I believe the Red Hats are. Now, the Marines are putting this forth that maybe it was the Red Hats who went in and got this group, but I think it's much more likely this was the shadow rogue FEMA group who killed these 4 individuals because they failed to secure the kidnapping of the children. Sort of like a mafia hit. So that's who I believe the Red Hats are. A shadow CIA group, and they're putting out public information and alleging this group represents conservative American citizens. So that's going on, but we can praise God that the 11 children were rescued in Kansas by the great U.S. Marines. And now we have this going on. Yep. Now, we'll talk a little politics. So Joshua Phillip is bringing this out. We know we have running for president in November of 2024. We have President Trump. We have JB, the actor, wearing a mask. It'll be interesting to see if he actually runs. We have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. also running as an independent. So we have President Trump as Republican, JB as a Democrat. Now the Dems recognize JB. So JB's approval rating was at 8%, then it went down to 7%. Now it's going down to about 6%. When you get in this area, you have polls that have plus or minus usually 2 to 5%. So you're getting at rock bottom of the polls. The Dems see RFK Jr. as possibly being a threat to JB. He's secured 10% approval rating. Now, the Dems have lost it, and I think the American people are awake. And now we have this from Joshua Phillips, CROSSROADS, talking about another court case where we have the thought police in play regarding J6 individuals. So we have a judge rules in a U.S. Court of Appeals that Judge Walton, who found earlier that an individual who had been inside the Capitol building on January 6, 2021, could have his computer monitored. His name is Daniel Goodwin. And then Daniel Goodwin brought a lawsuit against the FBI, and now it's been ruled that the U.S. court system has no laws that allow them to become thought police, nor to be able to track and monitor someone's computer. And part of the case had the illegal allegation by this Judge Walton that Daniel Goodwin had engaged in disinformation when he had an interview with Tucker Carlson March 14 of 2023. So we see an evil and corrupt U.S. court system trying to monitor speech and even thought. So that's going on. And now we have this. So we know President Trump has several trials going on. One of them is called Hush Money with Stormy Daniels. Now, it's come out that Stormy Daniels gave a deposition that's a formal statement that she never had a relationship with President Trump, but the judge in the Hush Money trial would not allow President Trump's defense attorneys to bring forth evidence nor witnesses. There was simply a charge, and the judge ruled against President Trump. So that's going on. Now, it's coming out that this judge wants, this judge, MERCHAN, he's in New York, because we see an evil and corrupt court system currently operating in some areas in New York. So this Judge Merchan this week gagged President Trump and his family and Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and his family. You can't talk about this case. I'm the judge. I threw out the Constitution, all forms of law, federal, state, and local. I rule like a dictator. Yeah, so that's going on. So we see all the... It's amazing. All right, so now we'll talk about another court case going on against President Trump. That's in Fulton County, Georgia. Where we have the District Attorney Fannie Willis and continued efforts to disqualify her. And now the judge in Fulton County, I'm assuming that must be McAfee, no, Georgia Court of Appeals, overturns Judge McAfee's efforts to remove Fannie Willis and to impose efforts to gag her on the case. Now we see in New York, and by the way, this is a RICO case about the election that took place in 2020. We see this is a typical Dem movement. Whatever they're guilty of, they project on their opponents. So yeah, that's going on. So in New York, the Attorney General, Letitia James, we had a recent appeals court overturn the grotesque fine for President Trump and reduce it to $175 million. This is a fine so that President Trump then can go to the appeals court regarding his conviction in a real estate deal where there were no victims and no crime. It's simply that the judge, one, multiple sources say, received $10 million to bring this charge against President Trump regarding real estate deal. No victims, No one was bringing a charge against President Trump. The court made up a charge that is regarded nationwide as ludicrous regarding assessment of value of real estate. Nevertheless, so we have this. Now, so the appeals court reduced the fine for President Trump to pay in cash just so he would have the right to appeal the conviction in the case. Also illegal. We see New York, the whole state, and especially in New York City, operating in some of their courts illegally. But Letitia James says, oh, I don't care what the appeals court says. I'm going to reject this and move ahead to seize President Trump's property. Letitia James, I want Trump Tower, so I'm just going to take it. Hey, when you throw out the Constitution and all forms of law, federal, state, and local, you can become lawless and do what you want. Of course, other real estate investors are saying, no way am I investing in real estate in New York, and especially in New York City. So that's going on. Now we have this. From 107, we have what's going to the Supreme Court. So to the Supreme Court, we have cases moving from Arizona, Michigan, plus that has to do with the election in November of 2020, wherein it is proven, there's evidence that the Dominion voting machines were not certified, and that means that the electoral count of the Electoral College, part of the process of determining who won the presidential election, has to be thrown out. Now we know that Kim Clement, the late prophet, said America will have 2 presidents one day. It's also being brought out that in Serbia, the nation of Serbia, where the Dominion headquarters are located, that in November 1 to 5 of 2020, Hunter Biden was in this office or near it to monitor the counting of the votes in the presidential election 2020. So there's evidence moving forward for this. Now, more evidence is coming out that ties Hunter Biden and JB to the election of November 2020 and the miscount plus money for the T attack in Russia on March 22nd, when about 160 people were mowed down, civilians, watching a concert. So evidence is coming out. Hunter Biden, through the Ukraine gas company Burisma, was funneling money to the Serbian headquarters, Dominion headquarters, and across the U.S. at different states and different election officials. And also that money went from Burisma, the gas company in Ukraine, to fund the recent T attack in Russia. So that's going on. And now we have this also. I talk about the court system in New York, and I talk about laws, Constitution, and all forms of law going down. Now, in New York City this week, they had 3 explosive devices that were found and defused by the great New York City Police Department, but there was a blackout by the mainstream media in New York City. They don't want the American citizens in New York City riled up against the illegals. And many believe nationwide that we've seen millions of illegals come in since JB was put in 2021. And that includes military of CCP terrorists from around the world. It's widely believed by American citizens that this deep state in charge of much of the U.S. government and a shadow part of the U.S. military also pre-position locations of weapons and explosives for the illegals to use to kill American citizens. Well, we saw this week 3 explosive devices that was brought out by Hal Turner's intel, but there was a blackout by the mainstream media in New York City, so the citizens of New York City would not know. And we saw recently a New York City citizen killed by illegals. Her mother passed away. She went to secure her mother's apartment. Illegals were there and killed her. Also, a blackout by the mainstream media in New York City. Now, Cliff High is coming out with this WebBot data that by June or July of this year, the normies are going to wake up. Something horrific is going to happen. They're going to wake up to the fact that they have been lied to their whole lives by the mainstream media, and many seers have seen it is the normie group. When they wake up, this group will build the gallows in the streets of Washington, D.C. Now, I believe that God and President Trump and the great American citizen patriots are in the process of uprighting the ship that is America, that has been sinking. But I believe it's being uprighted and will be repaired with God's mercy coming forth in answer to our prayers. So I say, God bless America. A short prayer. America. It's based on America the Beautiful. May our skies remain forever clear and blue. May amber waves of grain ever fill our plains. May pilgrim feet ever seek our shores who are aligned with God. And we say, God bless America, beautiful place of patriot dreams and a brotherhood from sea to shining sea. And we say thank you, God the Father, God the Son, Jesus, whom many call Yeshua, and God the Holy Spirit. I say to my family and friends, remain steady out there. Continue to pray. God is in charge, and He is on the move. I love you, and I'll see you soon.